All right, today we're diving into a really profound spiritual idea. One that's, simple on the surface, but wow, is it demanding? We're talking about the divine will. We're going to break down what it is, what it looks like to actually live it, and why it's seen as the ultimate guide for the soul.
So let's kick things off with a question that, honestly, goes against everything we're taught today. I mean, our whole culture is built on personal choice, right? Do what you want. But the writings we're looking at, they flip that script completely. They ask, what if true freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, but about doing exactly what you're told?
So what is this divine will anyway? Well, according to these texts, it's not just a list of commandments. No, it's presented as the fundamental, life-giving energy of the entire universe, the very source of all goodness, and the one thing that keeps a soul, spiritually alive.
Okay, let's start with the absolute core idea here. The divine will isn't framed as some gentle suggestion or a helpful tip. It's presented as the ultimate absolute authority. Period.
And get this, the language here is incredibly stark. It's not just a nice idea. The text literally says the divine will is love itself. So separating yourself from it, that's not just a small misstep. It's described as a fatal error, one that leads to the spiritual death of the soul. So yeah, the stakes couldn't be higher. It's truly a matter of life and death.
And this idea builds and builds until you get to what the source calls the supreme law of life. This isn't just one authority among many. It's the single, unbreakable mandate for everything and everyone in creation.
This really lays out the central conflict, doesn't it? On one side, you've got our human will, which these writings describe as, inherently flawed, temporary, and kind of rebellious. And on the other side, the divine will, which is seen as perfect, all-important, and the very origin of everything good. The whole journey is about choosing which one you're going to follow.
And the consequences for choosing poorly? They're presented as unbelievably severe. This quote from the source really doesn't pull any punches. Disobeying isn't just a mistake. It's put on the same level as the darkest spiritual sins, like magic or idolatry. It's seen as literally aligning yourself with Satan.
Okay, so if that's the reality this text presents, how in the world does a person actually live by this supreme law? Well, that brings us right to the how-to part. The path of transformation, which is all about the journey from living for yourself to a life of true sanctity. The source material gives us 3 core pillars for this transformation, and they are not negotiable. First, absolute obedience. Then, that obedience has to be fueled by an all-encompassing love. And finally, both of those are proven through a life of continuous sacrifice. According to this view, these 3 aren't separate things. They're all tangled up together.
Let's dig into that first pillar for a second. We're not talking about just gritting your teeth and doing what you're told. No. This absolute obedience is described as something you do promptly and cheerfully. It requires total, unquestioning trust, even when it makes zero sense to you. And the ultimate point of it all? To completely conquer and get rid of your own self-will.
I just think this metaphor from the text is so powerful. It paints this picture of the soul as a bunch of raw, wild fibers. And through this process of obedience, it's like those fibers are slowly, carefully woven into this beautiful, precious cloth, one that's decorated with all these virtues. It's a total transformation, a complete remaking of who you are.
The source also gives a very practical tool for this journey. The prayer we all know as the Our Father is actually held up as the perfection of prayer. Why? Because its central request is, "Thy will be done." It's seen as the #1 way to verbally and spiritually fuse your own will with the divine will.
And if we actually break that prayer down, like this chart does, you can see how all its different pieces support the ideas we've been talking about. It's basically a vehicle for expressing faith, hope, and love, all while formalizing the act of obedience and, this is key, asking for the help you need to actually do it. Abstract ideas are one thing, but to make this all a bit more concrete, the source points to 3 key figures who really live this out. So let's take a look at these luminous examples of the divine will in action. So, the ultimate model, no surprise, is Jesus Christ. His whole life is described not just as an act of obedience, but as a continuous epiphany, a constant unfolding revelation of what it looks like to live in perfect harmony with the Father's will, from his daily work to his acts of charity and submission to the law. Next up, Mary. Her famous response to the angel, the fiat,
which is just Latin for let it be done, is held up as the perfect example of submission. It was immediate, it was loving, and it was done even though it defied all worldly logic and put her entire reputation on the line.
And then we have St. Joseph. This table does a great job of breaking down his role. It shows how he lived out the divine will through both his spiritual duty, protecting the Holy Family, and his material duty, doing humble work and comforting Mary. He is the ultimate model of quiet, just service.
And here is another just beautiful metaphor from the text. Joseph's strength isn't shown as some brute dominating force. Instead, it says he consciously bent his manly strength and his own judgment and transformed them into these delicate embroideries of obedience. It's about power being put completely in the service of a higher will.
So, after all of this, the submission, the sacrifice, the constant obedience, where does it all lead? What's the point? Well, that brings us to our final section, the promise of eternal glory. This is the ultimate goal of this very demanding path.
And here's the crucial takeaway. The end goal isn't just to be a good rule follower. The whole process of aligning your will with the divine will is meant to purify and sanctify your soul. It's supposed to fundamentally change your very nature to make you worthy of the ultimate reward, heaven.
And the source material could not be clearer on this. This isn't just one of many ways to get there. It is presented as the singular, #1 path to eternal glory.
And finally, how do you even get this understanding? The text draws a really clear line in the sand here. This is not knowledge you can get from a textbook or through scientific reason or intellectual pride. It's framed as a divine revelation, something that's given by God and received only through simplicity, purity, and love. So when you boil it all down, this path of the divine will, it demands everything. Total surrender. It's about setting aside your own ambitions, your own plans, for a higher command. And that leaves us with this huge, timeless question, doesn't it? In whose will does a life find its ultimate meaning? Our own or something bigger? Something to think about. Thanks for diving in with us.